Exit 102. All right, so I just got back from New Jersey yesterday, and we had a big debut screening of my film, The Center of Distance, and I had an epiphany while I was there, because I was watching this film on one of the most amazing nights of my life, like my first feature film, our first public screening. You know, very few people had seen it. We had a packed theater. It was amazing. It was amazing. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, damn, it's a gigantic screen. It's like a 24-foot by 25-foot screen. We filled up the screen, so a little bit was leaking off because, you know, I shot 16 by 9. But man, I'm thinking, wow, this really holds up to a big screen. And the sound was incredible. Like I mixed it, I edited it, I did everything myself, and I saw it and I heard it in a whole different way. And, you know, I was kind of insecure going into it because I was wondering if shooting this film on my cell phone, if it was going to hold up to a big screen. You know, I was kind of afraid it was going to be pixelated. And not at all. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was like being at the movies, for real. It was being at the movies, for real. Shot on my LG V40 smartphone. So, what was my epiphany, though? It's been well documented that I've been trying to decide what camera to get. You know, like, I'm getting ready to shoot my next film. I need a second camera for this film. And I've been going back and forth and driving everybody who knows me crazy. You know, I'm shooting on a Sony A7400. I got this after I finished shooting my film, which took 2 years, and I shot the whole thing on my cell phone by myself. I decided to buy a camera because I became obsessed with filmmaking, and I kind of morphed from a theater artist to a theater artist and a filmmaker now, and I've shot a documentary since. But I got a Sony A6400, which is a crop sensor APS-C camera, which is an amazing camera and a camera that I absolutely love. But I want a second camera for this film, and I also feel like I know this camera inside out now. I wanted to get a full-frame camera. Of course, that meant that I was also going to have to buy full-frame lenses, and it was going to cost me a lot. And then Sony comes out with the FX30, which is kind of like the beast of all APS-C cameras. It's the baby of the FX3. It's a cinema camera. And so I've been doing like exhaustive research. Do I get the FX30, or do I go for a full-frame camera and spend the money and get an A7S3, which immediately was out of the question because I did not want to spend that kind of money. $3,500, $4,000 for a camera. I really can't do that right now. Even though the A7S3 I think is the perfect camera for me. Or through my research, I looked at the Blackmagic Cinema 4K, which got out of the question because it's a micro four thirds, and same thing, you know, I couldn't adapt any of my Sony lenses to it, so that was out of the equation. The Panasonic S5, I started to research that, and that camera, I have to say, has everything that I want, incredibly affordable. I found some deals that included lenses, included SD cards, included all kinds of stuff. It's got anamorphic mode built into it, and I've become obsessed with anamorphic. It's a full-frame camera, and it's like a little less money than the Sony FX30. So I looked at that and I'm like doing exhaustive research on these cameras. You know, I also thought about the Sony A6600 because one thing that I definitely want for this next film is I need stabilization for my camera because this Sony A6400 has no stabilization. And so the Panasonic is supposed to have the best stabilization in the business. And so more and more I'm looking at this Panasonic, but I'm like, yo, I'm a Sony guy. Like, I'm so involved in Sony. All the YouTubers that I follow are Sony shooters. And then I started to think like, you know, this is just kind of like a thing, like a, you know, like Sony, you know, backs a lot of these YouTubers, you know, they sponsor them. And so I got into this Panasonic world and I got really involved with the GH6. And again, I kept going back to the S5, the S5. And so anyway, what I realized when I watched my screening, and by the way, Asbury Park, New Jersey, the place where I kind of made the biggest transition in my life when I left the music business and I went to, you know, Asbury Park when a lot of things in my life had completely fallen apart. And I got treated so well there, like the community down there just embraced me. I mean, when I moved there, I did not know one person in that city, nobody. It's part of the reason I moved there because like I said, a lot of stuff had completely fallen apart in my life, including the death of my mother, who was like the last remnants of my adoptive family. So I kind of felt like I was a foster kid again. You know, I was feeling kind of alone. And again, I'm not going to get into all my personal stuff from that time, but a lot of things completely just broke. And I was broken at that time. And moved to Asbury and I met people from like ArtsCap, this arts organization down there, and people from the Stephen Crane House who supported my work. And I met this guy named Stephen Bishop Seeley, who was a, you know, a director and a artistic director of a theater company down there, and he supported my work and basically taught me how to be a theater artist. I'm sorry, I was kind of preoccupied for a second because I'm shooting at the Eleanor Roosevelt estate here up in Hyde Park, New York. And the cops came before and asked me what I was doing and went through all my stuff. So anyway, it was amazing to be down in Asbury to do this first screening. I really wanted to do it down there. A guy named Michael Sedano came, who used to run a theater down there that was the first real theater that allowed me to do live work. It was a movie theater called The Showroom, and he was just kind enough and supportive enough to let me go in there and do my thing. He showed up, my high school football quarterback showed up, but really it was an event for the guy who did the score, Steve Peckman, because he lives in that area still. And so anyway, it was amazing, it was beautiful, but the epiphany that happened to me was that I'm watching this and I'm thinking, damn, I shot this on my cell phone, you know? And now I've been shooting on this camera for a long time and I know what I need. I know the exact things, the exact tools that I need for this next film. And stabilization is a big deal for me. Now, the Sony FX30 is supposed to have great stabilization, but this Panasonic S5 has the capabilities of a camera twice or three times its price. And it's something that I feel like I can really grow with. And it also has something that's really important to me because, you know, you're trying to choose something that works in your workflow, you know, the way you work. And I often use the eyepiece, you know, the viewfinder in my camera. And the Sony FX30 does not have a viewfinder, which is the case for a lot of cinema cameras. I think I'm getting a little bit dark here, right? So anyway, Sony FX30 does not have a viewfinder. And I do not want to be in a situation where I'm running around with an external monitor all the time. Like, you know, I am truly run and gun. I'm shooting all by myself. I'm shooting myself. I'm trying to be really, really kind of cutting edge with this process of making a film. And so I know that I needed two things that were really important to me. I wanted stabilization, and autofocus was kind of important to me, I thought. But then while I was watching this movie, I was remembering, like, you know what? I shot manual focus 95% of the time. Like, I set up, you know, where I would be. I set the focus of the camera. I set the aperture so I had enough space so I could move a little bit. And I didn't really use autofocus more than 10% of the time. And the Panasonic S5 does have autofocus, but you know, everybody says, oh, it sucks. And you know what, I guarantee you it does not suck. It might not be Sony, it might not be Canon, But you know, what a lot of YouTubers don't tell you is that when they test the autofocus, like if they're running around like a guy like Brandon Lee on a gimbal, you know, creating all kinds of content, they don't keep everything that they shoot in one long shot. You know, like when you use an autofocus, it is definitely hunting around at some point, unless you're just shooting something like this. And by the way, I'm using a Sony A6400 right now. I'm shooting with my Sigma 16mm lens, and I'm using manual focus right now, because that's what I go to all the time. And as a matter of fact, you know what? Let's put it on autofocus for the rest of this thing. And let's have an agreement that this is kind of a test for the autofocus and see what happens. Because this is Sony, this is Sigma, it's supposed to be the best in the business. Let's see if that's the case, if I move around a little bit. If I get further away, or if I get closer, if the light changes slightly. See, a lot of YouTubers don't tell you that they take these long shots and they go into editing and they chop out the bad parts, the parts where the lens and the cameras start hunting for focus. And if I'm shooting a film where everything is intentional, I'm not really worried about autofocus so much, and I'm not truly a YouTuber. Like, I'm not making any money from this. I don't have any sponsors. You know, I'm looking at it more from an intentional perspective or an intentional point of view. Like, I am setting up these shots. I know what I'm doing. I'm making narrative films. And so, yeah, that S5, you know, I watched Patrick Tomaso's videos, and he's a, you know, Panasonic user, great filmmaker, one of my favorites, and he really was championing that camera. But then I watched a video of his recently where he did a review of the A74, the Sony A74, which is a hybrid camera, Sony, great autofocus, and he said, yeah, this is better than the Panasonic S5. But I thought, nah, man, like, just for vlogging maybe, or just for going out and shooting yourself, but overall, it's $1,000 more money. It's lacking in a lot of things that the Panasonic S5 have, anamorphic support. You know, they both shoot 10-bit 422, 4K 60. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe that Sony A7 IV is a little bit better in certain ways, but I think in a lot of ways, especially with regards to filmmaking, because I'm not a photographer either. I don't do still shots. Like, I use my cell phone for that. You know, I don't really go out with my camera and do still photography. I make film. And so I think the Panasonic S5 is the way to go. And so actually, I bought a Panasonic S5 today. So my journey is over. And so all of my friends are going to be so happy because I'm not going to be driving them crazy anymore deciding what camera should I use or should I buy, I'm sorry. And I'm all the way in, because another big thing for me was I was trying to make a good investment, you know, and the S5 seems to really keep its value because it's not really that expensive. I mean, it's expensive for most normal human beings, but it's nothing compared to the Sony FX30, the Canon, you know, C200 or whatever it is, you know, the cinema Canon cameras, the A7S III Sony. Like, it's nowhere near that amount of money. And so I feel like I made a good investment, and I feel like I can really grow with this camera. Like, there's so much inside of this camera that I can learn from. I know that my computer can handle the files. I have a desktop that could basically run an airport. I mean, it's so powerful. I'm not really worried about that, and I'm probably going to shoot my film in 1080 anyway, because it's probably going to be around 2.5 hours. And who wants, you know, 2.5 hours of 4K? I don't think that's a smart idea. So it's not a big deal, you know. But I am looking forward to shooting more 10-bit 422. You know, I don't shoot a lot of slow motion stuff, but I'm starting to get a little bit more into it lately. You know, I'm just like a fan of older films, and my style is really inspired by older films. Like Cinema Paradiso is my favorite film of all time ever in the history of the world. I'm not blowing things up. I'm not doing high-speed car chases and things like that. And so I think I made a really great decision. And so, you know, it's funny that I was inspired by myself shooting a movie, an entire 2-hour and 6-minute feature film that is now an award-winning film. It's won all kinds of awards, like, you know, Best Indie Feature, Best Original Score, definitely, you know, Best Actor in a Leading Role. You know, we've won a bunch of awards. And I shot it on my phone, and I have now seen it on a big screen, and it looks super crazy good. I mean, certainly there's a lot in that film. It was the first thing I ever did in my life. I shot it before I had any idea what I was doing. I didn't know what white balance meant. I didn't know what aperture was. I didn't know anything. I learned on the fly watching all these YouTubers who, like, I could never thank them enough. You know, Mark Bone, Brandon Lee, Danny Gevirtz, like all these guys. I learned so much from these guys and these women. And I could never thank them because I'm probably never going to meet them. But I learned so much, and also because the LG V40 had all the manual controls, I was able to learn all of the things that a professional camera has. You know, I didn't have to use Filmic Pro software. I had everything in the camera. And I had autofocus, but it didn't have stabilization. So I got a lot of shaky footage, but I got what I wanted. Like, I got the feeling of what I wanted. You know, I like footage that doesn't look perfect, like gimbal perfect. It's kind of not my thing. Or maybe I'll use it for 1 or 2 shots or something like that, but only when it's appropriate. I mean, I have a Weebill S. I have a great gimbal, and I practice with it every day, and I'm pretty good at it. So I can get those kind of shots if I need them, but it's going to be a pleasure to have a camera now that has great stabilization, because I can go handheld. I don't have to carry my gimbal around with me all the time, and I don't have to have an external monitor because I'll have the viewfinder. And so, Panasonic S5. I'm all the way in, and I'm really excited about growing and learning with this camera. How's the autofocus been this whole time? I think it's been pretty good because I see the box. So real quick, I just want to thank everybody in Asbury Park, and I want to thank Derek Bloom, who, you know, ran the event for us at the Trinity Church. The Trinity Church, ironically, is 1 block from where I used to live in Asbury Park, and I used to rehearse in that park all the time because I'm kind of like this renegade street theater artist that started, you know, developing my work in the streets. And so I've performed for 1 person, I've performed for 1,500 people in bigger theaters, but Asbury Park was such a huge part of my developmental process. And I want to thank the Arts Cap people, Carol Sanovitis, Kay Hall. You know, I want to thank Phil Wharton for showing up, the guy who taught me how to train properly. I mean, I've been an athlete my whole life, but when I had an pretty bad injury, it led me to the Whartons, to Jim and Phil Wharton, and Phil and Tommy Nohilly and those guys. They taught me how to train properly. Steve Peckman, the guy who did the score for my film, genius, you know, John Coltrane level musician who brought in all these other musicians to contribute to the film. You know, all my singer-songwriters, you know, I reached out to friends from my former life in the music business. I scoured their websites and I found these amazing songs, and I asked them if I could use them for the film, and they all said yes. So thank you to all of you amazing singer-songwriters. Lily and Nell, one of them, showed up to the screening the other night, drove all the way to Asbury from Philadelphia. My friend Ida, who I met for the first time from social media, came all the way from Queens, and she's dealing with some huge challenges in her life right now, and so it was just incredibly moving for me to see her show up. You know, I'm John Kaplow, a filmmaker, professional filmmaker from Asbury Park, showed up and just, you know, couldn't have done the event without him. There are so many people that I could thank. You know, Tom Chesick, the best writer that I know. You know, a journalist who is like, it's like if Hemingway wrote about you. Because, you know, a lot of journalists, they're not great writers, you know what I mean? But when Chesick writes about you, that's something special. So he wrote a great review. You can go to my website and see it. And I guess I'll finish with this. You know, I'm now a Panasonic S5 user. I'm going to keep my Sony A6400. It's going to now be my B camera for this film. They're both weather sealed. I'm shooting this film in bad weather. The sun is kind of getting to me now, so let me make an adjustment here. Hopefully I'm not blown out and destroyed. Get a little further away. So, and testing the autofocus again. Let me actually move the camera a little bit. That might help. Yeah. Now it's all crooked. Work with me for a second. Okay. That ain't so bad. So both of these cameras are weather sealed. That was a big thing for me too, because I'm going to be shooting in bad weather. So anyway, I'm a Panasonic S5 user now. I look forward to spreading my wings a little bit and not being just a Sony guy, although I love Sony. You know, this A7400 will always be my first camera, my first real camera other than my LG V40. By the way, I used the LG V20 to record all the sound in the film because it records 24-bit 96 kilohertz audio. And The sound is perfect, like movie quality. Like definitely this film could be in theaters and on HBO and Netflix and all of it. Like I'm so proud of it, and I'm so honored and humbled by everybody who contributed to it, because it never could have become what it became if I just did it myself. There's no way. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody in Asbury Park. I love Asbury Park. I miss it all the time. Of course, I'm a New York City boy forever, Spring Valley forever, Rockland County. Now I live up here in Poughkeepsie, and you know what? I got up here yesterday and I was so happy to be home. It feels like home here, and I was really worried about that, but you know, where I live is beautiful. My landlords are amazing people. Everybody on my block, so nice. My friend Gold, who kind of guided me up here. I'm about, I think, 80 miles north of New York City now. Just before I shot the video, I went over to Marist College, and I go to the boathouse a lot. It's a really peaceful place, and I do a lot of writing there and kind of just a lot of reflecting, and I'm just happy to be here. So if you want to see The Center of Distance, if you want to see my film, just go to Vimeo On Demand and search for The Center of Distance, or just go to my website, go to the Center of Distance page, go to thecenterofdistance.com, go to rockwilk.com, and just find your way around. You will find links to the Video On Demand page, and please watch the film. I think it's $3.99 to rent it. You could buy it if you want. Can't download it, but you could then watch it as much as you want streaming. And I'm so proud and I'm so honored. I'm looking forward to what's ahead. So again, thank you Lily Annell, thank you Barbara Annell, we family, yo. And Steve Peckman, and Steve, man, he lost his father today, and he has been working under very difficult circumstances for a really long time. And I truly believe that his dad allowed him to have the screening the other night, because like I would say 60 of the people in that theater the other night were there to see Steve and to receive the work that he did. And so I send this video out. I dedicate this video to Steve and his father and his family, Susan Peckman and his kids, everybody. He's got a beautiful family, and I look forward to the next film, because he's going to be collaborating with me on the next film as well. So that's it. I'll stop there. I've talked enough. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one, and you'll be seeing videos now with the Sony. I don't know when the Panasonic is going to come. I don't think it's going to ship for a little while, because I got it at Adorama, and they're off right now for the Jewish holidays, and so I don't know. I don't know when I'll start shooting with it. You'll still see the Sony A6400 videos, but I'm not going to do many tech videos moving forward, although I am going to share my process with you, so there will be quite a bit of tech involved, but I'm not like doing camera reviews or things like that. I am obsessed with the lens journey. Like choosing lenses and deciding which lenses to use for certain purposes is like a very spiritual process for me. So I will be sharing that. So I guess I still will be doing kind of review, tutorial, process sharing videos, but really my stuff is going to be more about story and the more kind of mental, emotional, mind, body, spirit process of making art, whether it be my theater, my filmmaking, music, whatever. It's all about balance, like I just said, mind, body, spirit, and just, being a human being. Because as my friend Tongo Eisen Martin said to me one day, sitting out in front of the Bronx Museum of Art on the Grand Concourse in the Bronx, my beloved Bronx, he said, Rock, the only way to become a better artist is to become a better person.